CES. I followed along with this story, but we're going to get a little bit of the backstory about this, and we're talking about Joey Ricard, our next guest here, who's with CloudPay Technologies, then the different things they're trying to do to change the way that we interact in retail. Joey, hello.
How you doing? Yeah, so I guess you've been following along with the drama with CES, I guess.
I did. I followed along because I was down there. We were broadcasting, but I figured, because we want to go into your technology and everything that you're doing, but I figured maybe for everybody watching, if they don't know what happened at CES, maybe we could just walk through what your booth setup was and what kind of happened, just as kind of a brief backstory of what went on there.
Yeah, so, we booked the show with CES, and we spend a lot of time and money and effort. It's not really cheap going to CES and dragging a 800-pound machine with you. So when we went, I called, and we all know like there's differences in the industries between CBD and hemp and also cannabis, and there's a lot of misunderstanding or around the different industries in general. And at the end of the day, we don't actually touch the product. We create a technology that helps the industry. And our technology is a little different than what people are used to. So what we did is, I called up every single hotel that we were possibly showing. We had 2 different locations. I talked to the rep at CS, and I, found the different locations we were able to actually have our booths located at, and ironed out all the plans and made sure, and then booked hotels and logistics, moving these 900-pound machines or whatever to the floor and everything. And then we show up on Saturday. We set up our booth, and one of the floor managers sees CBD, and they're like, "Oh no, we can't have CBD, blah blah blah. That's marijuana." I was like, "That's crazy." And then Sunday, they were still like debating on it, and then they said, "All right, you have to completely move your booth off the floor." So they came down, shut us completely down, took everything off the floor, both our booths completely empty. We had one in the Sands, one in the Westgate area hotel, and then Sunday night we were done. Like basically we made every call we could, everyone we knew, and tried to get this all, try to explain to them the difference in CBD and how hemp is a non-psychoactive part, right? And then Sunday night I wrote an email to everyone I could and basically data mined half the board and the CEO directly and explained the differences in hemp and cannabis, and also how our technology is not meant. This could be used for insulin, for diabetics to have medication 24/7, right? There's pharmacy applications to this. Weed machine to us was just a joke and idea, but the reality is it's probably one of the most heavy regulated products. Definitely, like dispensaries in general, are probably the most regulated per square foot retail store in the industry. So we had to educate them and explain that CBD has, all the medical benefits, or a lot of medical benefits that you see in cannabis, but it's completely derived by hemp, which is legal and signed, by the president, through the Farm Act. So after our petition and explaining it, Monday morning, I get an email saying, "Okay, we reviewed everything and you guys are now free to go back onto the floor." So we scrambled. We ended up only taking one of our booths. If you guys came by, saw the technology, it's pretty cool. It definitely turned a lot of heads. People weren't used to seeing, we're first cannabis technology and definitely the first CBD. We were the first CBD vending machine out there, and then probably the first CBD technology that I think CS has ever allowed in there. But yeah, it was definitely a little dramatic, but the industry has changed and they've been fighting these regulations and stuff, and a lot of misinformation and people not really understanding how CBD has medical benefits and doesn't really harm people. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, and you're right. I think there's a lot of education out there. I do find it just so ironic that the Consumer Electronics Show is in Las Vegas, where virtually anything goes on that you can think of. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to be offended by if you're going to be offended by a CBD vending machine, you probably shouldn't go to Las Vegas, number one. But on top of that, though, I'm glad it got resolved and that you had this work out, because you're right, the technology behind it can be applied to virtually anything. So let's talk about that. Just talk about maybe what CloudPay is, how it works, and maybe what problem you were trying to solve to begin with when you started working on this software.
Yeah, so interesting enough, we went to go look at another vending machine designer and one that's well known in the industry. And my business partner leans in my ear and jokes and says, "What if we did this for weed?" Right? And it just was completely a joke at first. And we started actually looking at it. We looked at the technology. We went talked to them and saw like really the technical stack and how the SDKs and everything integrate and our background APIs and actually integrating these types of technologies and pulling information. And we realized, one, they were hesitant. They said, look, there's no way we could do anything in this industry because of the payments, right? So first, in the biggest issue in cannabis in general has been the payment. So in the state of, Nevada, it's legal for cannabis. In California, it's legal. But because it's illegal still on the federal level, the payment processing is always going to be a problem until federal allows it because of the banking system. So we looked at it and we're like, well, these machines have pretty amazing technology. We have QR scanners, we have mobile apps, we have 1,000 different ways we can truly negotiate a payment process. So how could we apply that? And that's where the whole idea of CloudPay technologies first came from. So it was creating a solution around using cloud payment technologies into resolving the cannabis payment issues that we've had on a federal level. Because even in CBD, with it being legal, you still have today people processing their transactions through Europe because Europe has allowed CBD to be processed. So a lot of people are setting up their companies in Europe, processing their transactions there, and moving it around. So it's the payment side has always been a nightmare and or complex. So our technology that we've been building is one, of course, fixing the payments, integrating that into a hardware stack that, these vending machines, that also allows to do ID verification at the transaction. So, people are like, oh, but, what if kids get into it? The reality is we can make it to where the vending machine, you can't use it unless age. We can, we have cameras on the front of it. We can do facial recognition. We can make sure it's that person that's already been processed. I mean, the same way people do, KYC processing in cryptocurrency, right? So if you go on like Coinbase and you're trying to create a cryptocurrency wallet, you have to go through it and you have to do your KYC process, upload your ID, your passport, and everything else. And those KYC processes can be integrated at a vending machine. I mean, when you walk through the border, right? You actually use a machine now to scan your passport, verify who you are, and that's probably about 85% of border control whenever you're flying international flights now.
So, and you're right, absolutely. That's an interesting way to look at it because that kind of technology is being utilized in so many different ways. So, for a consumer experience, say, I'm walking up, where would these vending machines be, and how would that experience be for somebody walking up who wanting to purchase? We'll use CBD for an example for this one.
Yeah, so with regulations, every state's different, depending and also on what you're selling. So at the end of the day, regulations dictate what the product is being sold in the vending machine and how that product can be sold, right? So there's issues in other countries. We've talked to government officials that want to use our technology to move controlled substances, whether it's cannabis or other pharmaceutical drugs as well in other countries. But depending on the product, they have some regulations around it. And I can say that it's kind of messed up the laws around vending machines. And it had good nature, right? Because, at one point, vending machines, children can walk up, put in a couple quarters, pull a pack of cigarettes, and go out smoking. We had to stop that, so we got rid of vending machines for cigarette use. In many states, I mean, funny enough, I've seen it in Florida when I walked into a restaurant. I was like, "What? They have a vending machine for cigarettes?" And it wasn't using any ID verification. I mean, you could just walk in, throw $5, and pull out a pack of cigarettes. And this was in a family. To me, I've seen it happening. In some states, I know the regulations are loose, but, we can have these for cannabis currently in California. You can only have these vending machines inside of a dispensary, inside of the actual dispensary. Now, with CBD products in California, they're allowing you to put it inside like the waiting areas, which is kind of cool. So we're now working with some brands that want to wrap the machine in their brand. And in the waiting area, they're selling their CBD products while someone's like getting approved to go into the dispensary area because there's usually a long queue. So that's no problem. But CBD in a lot of states we can throw inside malls. But we can also go to other industries that have other products that I won't go into too much, but
Right.
I'll bore you. But there's so many industries where this technology applies to. As long as you do the age verification, ID verification, you can sell in malls all over the U.S. I mean, it just requires the age verification process.
I think you're right. Like the different kind of areas that you could sell in, like pharmaceuticals, or you even use the insulin example, something like that. That's a controlled substance. So if I'm an ordinary person and I want to utilize one of these machines, regardless of whatever the product is, what are the steps that I have to go through in order to be able to purchase from your machine?
Yeah, so it depends on the regulation of the
okay.
product, right?
So it depends on that.
Yeah, if you're doing CBD, honestly, some states don't even require ID verification or age verification.
Wow.
Some states are, the reality is it's kind of like requiring age verification to buy omega-3s, right? A lot of people take fish oil pills, and there's nothing, crazy cod fish oil pills, right? But they've originally they regulated things like cod fish oil as if it was as bad as taking in the regulations, I mean, are even crazier than cocaine and heroin in some of those regards, that were for cannabis in general. And we're seeing how people are lobbying and changing the regulations. We have it already approved on state level, but the DA has to change how it's registered on the federal level. But if it's cigarettes, or if it's like vaping, or it's stuff like that, it just has to be someone who's over 18 to buy like a like a pipe or hardware or something like that, But
Okay.
we've actually had, I mean, funny enough, we had someone from the sex industry approach us, which sounds crazy because the reality is our machines capture the user information. So at the time,
I was kind of wondering about that, like what you capture, and like, so I mean, you have a facial scanning system and all of that, and I'm sure there's an interesting one with the sex industry involved too. But sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but yeah, that's what I was really wondering about that.
Yeah, so I mean, even like we haven't required to do any kind of facial recognition yet, but what we've done like now is we have QR scanning codes on the front, right? So we can use that to actually scan and pull up like a mobile app ID. So we know the buyer, we know who they are at the time of purchase at a retail, which usually, let's say a typical retail distributor, no matter what the product, whether it's socks or if it's is CBD products, they tend to sell something and they don't know who's exactly buying it, and drilling into the really buyer persona, right? So by capturing the information at the machine and then taking that transaction information, applying it, you can kind of predict patterns on the person's buying behavior, and you can apply that. We'll also be able to capture emails, you can capture phone numbers. That way you can do marketing. So a one-time impulse buy at a mall, someone walks by, says, "What's CBD?" They see one of the brands we work with, they go over there, buy a product. Now that brand has that email. They know they bought, let's say, a tincture or a salve, and then they're turning around and emailing them and saying, "Hey, you can order every month," and now it's turning an impulse buyer to a monthly subscriber, right? So using technology, and this is going to happen in general, right? Like retail has been going through these stages. We've seen like kind of like it's not really dying, just like the music industry didn't die. It's just that the technology is going to change, and the industry is going to become smarter. And that's what happens with industries. They don't really die. They just go through version 2, 3, 4.0, right? And smart retail truly is going to change a lot of the ways that we as consumers buy our products. Like you don't need, like, a lot of people go through Amazon, they order delivery directly. If you can look at Amazon, see exactly what you want to, go to a vending machine, pick it up instantly, scan a QR code, it charges your Amazon account. These are the realities we're going to be having in the near future, and that's what we're building.
That's really fascinating, because you're right. That experience, it's not going away. It's just changing exactly how we do that. And that's kind of the same thing with pretty much all technologies when it comes down to it. Like that experience is still going to be there. So what's next for you guys? What's next for CloudPay?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting time since CES, right? I mean, we had like I was kind of nervous because we got basically our footprint cut in half, and we had to deal with that. But at the end of the day, we still had some amazing big companies come by. I mean, ones I wasn't expecting, like large auto came by and said, "Hey, this technology we can use to make sure that the person picking up their laser encoded key is that exact person." I was like, yeah, I mean, there's applications and industries of these large, companies that are walking through CES, large, I guess, Johnson & Johnson walked by, right? I mean, there were some pretty big players that walked by and showed interest in what our technology can do, and including the tobacco industry. So last weekend I was up in Vancouver. Met with some people in the tobacco industry, and that seems pretty interesting too. We opened up an investment round. They're looking at putting funding in us, and we're trying to find that smart funding for us. That way we can expand in the industries we see that to have the biggest impact. I mean, I originally was looking at trying to push this into the cannabis industry because of the regulations and all the hurdles that are there. Because if you can prove it in cannabis, you can truly prove this in a lot of other industries. They're kind of being hunted like witches and being, pushed out to the side. So at the end of the day, if we can fix, the issues around cannabis with the payment issues, the ID verification, proving that this technology can remove issues out of the industry and then use this for other industries. Because if you use this for opioids, for instance, it can help with pill shopping and people that are going around it and trying to go to multiple pharmacies. This is a better way to communicate and control the substances in some of these regards. So I see a long-term vision of what we'll do with this technology, but in the short term, right, it's just applying this to a couple of different cities, doing some tests out there, rolling with some big brands. The CBD industry up and these people love these machines, so it's pretty cool.
Well, Joey, thank you so much for hopping on here to talk about this. Really interesting stuff about how you're changing that consumer experience and just adapting to the technologies that are available. Joey, thanks for hopping on Digital Trends Live today.